Alright, so finally here on the last video, we cover the idea of injury to the skin, which, goodness knows, like I said, this is our primary contact with the outside world, so it probably has undergone a lot of wear and tear, right? So, really nice cartoon here to walk you through, right, the steps that occur when injury happens. And I said in the beginning, the previous video, that inflammation is our response to any tissue injury, right? And again, your epidermis, right, is dead on the stratum corneum, and there is no blood. It's avascular in the rest of the epidermis. So when you bleed, it means we have actually entered into the dermis itself, okay? And we've ruptured a blood vessel. So there can be injury to these cells, especially if you get down in here. Think about like a first-degree sunburn, right? Even second-degree sunburns can be just injuries to the epidermis, though you're starting to get into the dermis with a second degree, and you'll start inflammation then. But most of the time, or a contact burn can be the same. Most of the time, you probably equate injuring yourself with bleeding, right? So this cartoon addressed that, the stages of healing and what happens by the body, okay? So here, you have a fairly deep puncture wound, and you immediately, right, start to allow white blood cells, which are your defenders, and we'll talk more about them in AMP2, to leave the intact blood vessels. And of course the blood vessels that were ruptured up here would also have white blood cells. And so you'd arrive, these are all defenders, because I said, you know, you get this redness, heat, swelling, and pain, which are the cardinal signs of inflammation for a reason. And that's because you will increase blood flow in the intact vessels that weren't injured, and you will increase their permeability, which allows for these cells to leave, again, as part of your response. And this will then lead to the heat and swelling and redness. And then the pain comes from the fact that, of course, with all this swelling, you're going to put pressure on all the sensory, right, nerve, free nerve endings and so forth that are here in the dermis that we talked about previously, okay? So now once you've started this inflammatory response, the really big deal is to, right, contain the problem, kill anything that might have invaded you, because likely something did, right? Because even if you didn't cut yourself with something that was particularly, you know, nasty or you know, not sterile, right? The fact is that you'd have all these bacteria, viruses that hang out on your skin just waiting for an opportunity to enter your body, and once you've cut yourself, they can, right? So you want to contain the damage, you want to kill anyone that's invaded, you want to clean it up, and you want to repair it, right? So here we're coming in for the kill, right, and containment and kill, right? Here, as time goes on, again, a clot would form fairly rapid. Clotting time's about 9 seconds, so larger wounds would take longer, but a small wound should stop bleeding fairly quickly, right? And that will seal off, right, to not allow anything else in, but you've still got to deal with all the things that did get in already, right? You notice here that we've got some epithelium starting to invade downwards now, so the repair will be from the inside out. This is just going to contain, right, a temporary containment. So macrophages to, right, clean up and consume the dead things and help to kill things and contain them. Fibroblasts would be activated to start, right, producing more collagen and dividing themselves. And epithelial cells would also be increasing their mitosis and cell division, all right? And so time goes by here in C, and we're starting to see more and more fibroblasts, and the epithelium is repairing and moving back upwards, really to come back, restore, right, repair and restore to what we were originally. You don't see this typically because, again, this time takes place. You've got scar tissue that can form, right? And this is especially going to form if the injury is more extensive. And I always say to students, well, here's the problem, right? You have to basically create a barrier again as quickly as possible. And that scab is not a barrier, by the way. And so if you do more damage than you can keep up with through the rate of mitosis, right? In other words, these epithelial cells can only divide so quickly. And typically cells undergo mitosis about every 18 hours at top speed, right? And so if you've done such a lot of damage, then the fibroblasts, while they're dividing, and again, still just dividing every 18 hours, they are capable of making collagen. Collagen's not a cell. You can make a whole lot more protein in the time it would take to make a cell. And so a scar is typically a lot of collagen. Now that means that a scar isn't going to be functional, like if we had been able to replace the exact same cells. But this works for us. All right. Burns, again, we said this tissue, any tissue injury results in inflammation. So heat, radiation, electricity, chemicals can all burn us. If it's widespread damage, in other words, over quite a bit of surface area of the body, you would have dehydration, right, because you've lost that protective barrier, right? Remember, the skin keeps you from drying out. Electrolyte imbalance, because with the fluids would go these ions, and possibly renal and circulatory failure, right? You treat burns with fluids, nutrients, especially proteins, because proteins are going to provide the functional aspect. They're going to help us build the new cells. The carbohydrates and lipids are really going to just supply energy for this. And you try to minimize infection, all right? We classify burns by the depth of the tissue damage, right? And we treat them according to the surface area involved. And there's a rule of nines. Now, I'm not going to test you on the rule of nines, right? This is really more for clinical aspects, all right? So this is how you figure out how much fluid and electrolyte to treat them with. So you won't do this for me, all right? This is just remarking about how you would come to this calculation in treating someone with burns, all right? So the depth classification, superficial partial, deep partial, and full thickness is what we used to call first, second, and third degree burns. So you need to understand that superficial is only the epidermal, and it's classified by red and painful with some swelling, all right? It tends to heal fairly quickly because you haven't done much damage. Deep partial, outside of an infection, they often don't scar, but it really does depend on the person. This has damaged the dermis, so we've gone into the second layer, right? And edema is much more extensive, often blistering accompanies this, whereas it didn't here. Full thickness is I've gone through the epidermis and dermis, and so we're all the way through down to, right, the hypodermis, and you often have lost and will lose function because of this, and you'll experience scarring, right? And I said there is a fourth degree, which would be down in, we're in the muscle and bone, but that's pretty serious, right? So full thickness, right, this third degree, cannot be repaired by the body easily and generally requires skin grafting, all right? So of course, if it's just, you know, a really, really small area that you just, an intensely hot thing for too long and you burn through, then it's going to take time for that healing, and you may not, you're still going to risk infection, but you may not require skin grafting. But if it's over surface area, right, how much surface area is involved, you're facing the potential of having to graft skin. Now, we can make artificial skin, we can have skin donated, or we can try to remove skin from some part of your body and relocate it. But, you know, again, that removing it from you means you have to have enough healthy skin to do that. So often skin grafting involves using artificial skins or again, donated skin. So it's done to really prevent a lot of wound contracture and help the healing process and minimize infection. So I said autografts would be if you yourself could graft that, you could graft it from another part of your body. Allografts are going to be from somebody else, all right? It turns out that this works pretty well. Interstitial fluids right from the burn site will help to keep that donated skin alive until blood vessels will grow into it, and they will grow pretty quickly. And then epithelial cells in the graft will actually begin to divide and produce new epidermis, all right? And that really covers everything that we needed to cover for the integument. So I hope you've enjoyed the first system, and please let me know if you have any questions.